Hi everyone. We are about to get started on the Marketing for Marketplace webinar, but we're just going to give people another minute or two to come in until we get started. Usually people have a tendency to trickle in, and but it's nice to see there's already a lot of you guys listening in. I've been looking forward a lot to this webinar, and I'm not just saying this. I've been looking for Elle for 2 or 3 years because I wanted to do a webinar on marketing for marketplaces. So I was super excited when I found her. So that's good. So while we wait for people to get in, I'm just going to go through some house rules. The most important thing, I guess, is that we're recording this and we'll send out the recording afterwards so you can review it and you will be able to share it with colleagues or friends if you want to. And the next most important thing, which is also super important, is that you can ask questions. So if you look at the right hand side of your screen, there should be a place where you can put in questions for Elle during the conversation, and I think we'll probably save most of them to the end. Unless they kind of make super much sense to just shoot them in there, but I don't want to interrupt Elle too much. But make sure that you ask. This is kind of a, I was about to say once in a lifetime opportunity, but Elle is of course going to be here after the fact as well. And I'm sure if you have questions after the fact, she's going to be happy to answer them if you mail her as well. So that's it. I think now it's 2 minutes past. Let's just get going. So first of all, the webinar is called Marketing for Marketplaces, and we're gonna have a good chat around how you can market your marketplace or your sharing economy platform, gig economy platform to the audience. I am Sigrid Seidler and I work for Besedo. We do content moderation for marketplaces, done that since 2002. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time here. If you are interested in content moderation, you can just shoot me a mail afterwards, but the star of the show is Elle, and that's who we want to listen to. So I'll stop talking, and Elle, you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. And I love the once in a lifetime experience, but we have been looking for each other for a while because obviously we work in this quite niche space, which is around the sharing and gig economy. So I'm going to introduce myself just by telling you a bit about who I am and also how I came to be involved in this space. So really, I have had, like most of us, a career that sort of moves around. I started as an advertising creative, and then I moved into journalism and wrote for magazines and newspapers. And I actually pitched a story about 5 or 6 years ago about the sharing economy to The Guardian, which had a terrible pun title called Shares Are Going Up. It didn't actually ever get commissioned, but I did write some stories around the sharing economy. And this was very early on. It was before you could even say, you know, that something was the Airbnb for, because people hadn't necessarily even heard of Airbnb. I got really fascinated with this space. It seemed, you know, inspiring and new, but also a little bit old. And we'll move on to that a bit later. But I set up a PR company, specializing in the sharing economy, which was beyond niche, but the beauty of it was that although a lot of people maybe didn't necessarily know much about the sharing economy where I was in Edinburgh, or even really the UK that much, there was a global community which I became part of. And from there, I've set up Ganghart, which is a marketing consultancy specializing in this peer-to-peer marketplace world. And I also work as part of Marketplace Risk and chair the Sharing Economy Global Summit Committee, and I'm on the advisory board for the Marketplace Risk Conference, which is in San Francisco. So really, the learnings that I get every day from around the world, from various platforms, really help me to understand that when you market to these kind of two-sided platforms, you have got to do it in a slightly different way than if you were dealing with a traditional brand. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. This isn't going to be a sort of digital marketing, growth hacking style presentation. That's not my forte, and there's lots of people that are really good at that sort of thing. But what I do know how to do is talk to participants in platforms in the right way and understand different audiences, and know the best ways to reach them and work out how to connect with them in the best way. So that's a little bit of background. Now, they say that if you start a presentation with "people often ask me," it's probably not true that people often ask you that, but it is honestly true that people often ask me how marketing is different for two-sided marketplaces than normal marketing. So I'm going to tell you 3 ways that I think it's different, and the challenges that you can face, and some ideas for solutions. And I think the first really important way that marketing is different for peer-to-peer marketplaces is that we all need to remember that you're not just selling a product. It's not that simple. Your marketing has to work a lot harder. I've got this example here, and I think cars really illustrate this very well. We all know how to buy a car. We know the process. We know why we might want to buy a car. And these car adverts, one of them is from like the 1970s. One of them is a recent car advert. Don't really make you work very hard, because you don't need to. You get that it's a car. The headline is very short. You don't need to be sort of told what the benefits of the car might be. It gets you from A to B. You like the look of it, the color, whatever. It's all implicit, and we understand what the benefits are. Now, if you compare that to a sharing economy model, not many people will understand why they would borrow their neighbour's car rather than buy a car. So your marketing really has to take your potential users of the platform down a path and hold their hand and educate them, and take all their potential concerns and ease those really. And so there's quite a lot for the marketing to do. So, for example, if you were using a peer-to-peer car sharing platform, you might wonder, how that process would work. How, do I have to download an app? Do I have to meet the owner? What happens if I damage the car? Do I leave petrol in the car? When I finish with it? And really, what's the point of doing this? What's the benefit of it? It's not necessarily clear. Then, to make things even more complicated, you've got a whole bunch of different barriers and questions that somebody who is actually the provider, that's the person listing their car on the peer-to-peer car sharing platform. How does that work? What's in it for me? Do I have to download an app? Do I have to meet the person renting my car? What happens if they damage it? Will they leave petrol in at the end? All these questions. So there's a real sense that it's about learning the process and learning the reasons to do it, much more than the traditional just buying a car process. And that, obviously, cars are just an example there. And I always like to bring in an example from the gig economy too, because obviously the sharing economy is about sharing an asset. And say, for example, we've got these task apps where you can, get jobs done. I think there's some ones we'd all be familiar with, like TaskRabbit, Airtasker, and you're getting someone to help you maybe with a job around your house. So that might not be the way that people are used to doing it. So from the user side, how would I do that? Is the person going to be trustworthy? When will they come round? There's lots of questions there as well. And then for the provider side, the person listing their services, what's in it for them? Why would they not just use a traditional way of maybe being part of a joinery firm or whatever? There's lots of reasons to do something, but they're not always going to be clear, and the marketing has to answer the questions and provide the reasons, which is a tough job. So really, to summarize that, the marketing that you do for your marketplace has to take the potential users' hands and break down barriers, take them on that journey. And then, just to make it extra complicated, it has to do the same for the providers, and these might be different sets of reasons. So it's a tough job to to educate your users and your providers and educate them in different ways. And I think that's one of the first ways that your marketing for your marketplace is going to be different from traditional marketing. Secondly, I think trust is a really important issue. And Sigrid, I know this is obviously one of your favorite topics.
Yeah, this is where we shine.
Yes, exactly. So trust, I mean, obviously, you know, trust who? I think it's complex here, because you want to trust the platform brand, but within that, you're also asking your users and your providers to trust each other. So I've got a bunch of brands here, which I collected from. These have all been in different polls for the most trusted brands in the world. They've all appeared, and it just struck me, why do we trust them? Why? We don't really know anything about them. We don't know who owns them, and unless we've researched it at a sort of higher level, we don't know what sort of group they're part of. We don't know if they're ethical. We don't really know much about them, but these are the most trusted brands out there. Now, do we know who this is? This is our neighbor, and for some reason we don't trust her as much. Now, I think to me, an actual human being, somebody that lives nearby, is someone I would prefer to trust. But it's just a real change that's happened, I think, probably since the Industrial Revolution, is that we have expected to get our goods and our services from a big brand, and we trust that process. Whereas in the past, and this is why the sharing economy is new but old, in the past we would look around us to our peers for the things we wanted, but we've moved away from that. And the beauty of the sharing and gig economy, the platform economy, is that the technology is there now to connect us with people like this, with the people around us. And instead of sort of bowing down at the altar of big business, which, you know, and the reality is we don't know these big businesses as much. Instead of that, we can now use technology to connect with the people around us. But obviously, there's a trust issue there as well, and this is something that, you know, we have to work hard at, especially when we're doing the marketing. So, how can you use your marketing to build trust? Well, first of all, there's trust in your platform. So, trusting a brand. How can you make your brand trustworthy? I mean, this is a big piece, and probably, you know, for another webinar just on that. But, you know, in brief, I think it's really important to create a trustworthy brand, and quite often that is a brand that has a sense of purpose and a sense, you know, clear values. So say for example, I love using the example of Nike, and the founder of Nike. I've got the quote actually here. The founder of Nike said, "If you have a body, you're an athlete." And when you think of the Nike Just Do It, it's you know, it could be we sell shoes, but suddenly you've got a sense of purpose and emotion, and people engage with that. They engage with the sense of purpose in the brand. Another good example of a sort of human brand that people, especially younger people, relate to is the Dove brand, and they did the Real Beauty campaign. So these are ways, creating a human face, creating a sense of purpose, will really help people to engage with your brand. And another side of that is that if you create a brand that people engage with emotionally, they are less likely to connect on your platform, but then go elsewhere to connect with the person they found on your platform. They will have a sense of brand loyalty, and that's really important. And also making sure your messaging is instilled with trust, and that's not just sort of chucking the word trust into all your copy. It's more than that. It's telling stories, telling compelling stories of trustworthy people, using case studies. You'll see a lot of really trustworthy platform brands use the stories of their users a lot, and it becomes real and relatable. And also, I think if you have things to show people, show them your kite marks, show them your accreditations and your awards, and really build up that trust on lots of layers. Sigrid, I know this is particularly of interest to you, this area of trust, and being able to actually demonstrate that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's basically what we do, right? We make sure that your platform is safe, that there's nothing there that can break that trust with the users in the first place. So if we go down to your third point here, which I think is super super relevant as well, is that it's not enough to write, as you say, that you're trustworthy. You have to show it as well. And one of the things we make sure is that when people actually land on your first page, they don't see scams, they don't see bad blurry pictures, which would make them think, is this really gonna give me some good items or some good services? We remove that, and we actually did. I was digging that up when I was doing this. When I was preparing for this webinar, we did an interview with a psychologist, a behavioral psychologist called Sarah Ingvason some years ago. And one of the things that she was saying, because we were talking about, marketplace trust and how to build it and how to lose it. And one of the things she said was that if you lose trust from someone, it takes at least 10 good interactions to rebuild that trust, which is quite scary, right? Because when you have a new user landing on your kind of shopping window, which is the first page they land on your marketplace, and they see something negative, like a scam or like a bad driver or anything like that, they have a bad first interaction, you're probably not going to get that second chance or the third chance or the 10th chance to show them that's your platform is trustworthy. So from our perspective, you have to make sure that they never encounter that negative interaction in the first place.
10.
So, I think that's super important. And if I can, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, 10, that's a surprising amount, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, she had done a lot of research on bosses and something, and interaction with co-workers, where bosses with one bad interaction could just ruin the relationship for good almost. Can I just circle back to your first point, because it got me thinking. So this thing about creating a brand with personality and sense of purpose, just because it's super relevant right now. A couple of our current clients during the Corona crisis have actually not been negatively affected. And I'm doing some interviews with them right now to figure out. And one of the things that I see as a common trait is that as soon as the Corona crisis hit, they started banning all masks and medical equipment, so they didn't get this pride gorging. But the other thing they did, which I think relates a lot to what you were saying about having a purpose, is that they created categories for people who wanted to help other people during the crisis and people who needed help. So they kind of engaged locally and did that pro bono, so it's free of charge, to showcase that we are part of the community. We are not just someone sitting and trying to earn money from this, and that has helped them a lot.
Well, definitely, and we've seen some really interesting moves from marketplaces in the crisis, and I think the ones that will prevail are the ones who have immediately responded and laid out their values really clearly, and people will really respond positively to seeing that and seeing a sense of purpose immediately. Now, obviously, the two-sided piece is a big one, and it's one of the most important, sort of almost save the best till last ways that marketing for two-sided marketplaces is different. It's the two-sided thing, and it's the one I get asked a lot about. And it's another really tough job. So you're selling your brand, your purposeful brand to everyone. You want everyone to believe in your brand. You're also selling user benefits to your users. And just to recap on users and providers, obviously the provider is the person providing the service or asset, and the user is the person going onto the platform and making use of that asset or service. So you're selling these two things, the user benefits to users, provider benefits to providers. And just to confuse things, these two people could be the same person, or they might not be. And just to throw something else into the mix, it's not just about two-sided marketplaces, it's many-sided marketplaces. And people might think, well, how would that work? And I think a really good example of a three-sided marketplace could be food delivery app. So you've got your person like me who's going on Deliveroo to get your lovely Thai takeaway. You've got your your delivery driver or rider, and you've got your restaurant. So it's connecting all of these up. So let's talk a bit more about this user and provider. So I think a really good example of this, and when it comes to marketing, is there's quite a few platforms out there who offer, I think in the US they call them RVs, motorhomes, camper vans, and I think that there's a very distinct provider and user on a platform like this. It's an interesting example. So you've got maybe your provider is someone, I mean, some of these Winnebagos, they're hugely expensive, and they're a real lifestyle. There may be somebody more mature with an affluent might own, but they might want to rent it out when they're not using it. They might be interested in the sharing economy and the sustainability aspect of that, but they also might be interested in a bit of extra income when they're not using their camper van, their RV. So that's a very distinct person, and they also might be interested in the world of motorhomes. So say, for example, they might consume media or read magazines around that. So we've got this person, and then on the other side, we've got to think about somebody that would maybe want to go onto that platform and borrow a camper van. Now here we've got 4 millennial friends. Now, they're very unlikely to have enough disposable income to buy a camper van, but they probably wouldn't have maybe anywhere to park it anyway. So why would they want to own one? They're tapping into an experience. So the messaging for these 2 distinct groups is completely different. And the thing is that they would very unlikely be the same person. Somebody who has a camper van is really unlikely to want to borrow someone else's, and someone who is borrowing one is unlikely to have one to rent out. So you've got really distinct groups and very distinct ways to reach them. There's a hashtag on Instagram which is van life, and it's all trendy pictures of VW camper vans. You're really tapping into an audience who are interested in a van lifestyle and maybe going away at the weekends, versus somebody who's thinking about their asset that they've spent a lot of money on and they want to make that money back from it. They probably have some trust issues as well. So really different audiences, very distinct, very different ways of speaking to both of them as well. By contrast, I've got an example.
Can I just pop in and comment on this, because I think it's super interesting. Sorry for for interrupting, because I was at marketplace conference in Berlin in 2018, and the name is escaping right now, but there was a talk by one of the people running one of the biggest camper sharing sites in, I think, Germany, sorry, or maybe it was UK, I can't remember, it's been long and I had a child in between, so brain fried. But what was really interesting was actually that she said that it all actually started out with like a small community of people who were just super passionate about camping. And then they met up and they had these gatherings where they all camped together and they created this kind of, I don't know, happening, an event. And then they started sharing their campers and having other people who didn't own campers join those events. And some of them became camping owners as well, or van owners as well. But some of them, of course, would only do this one time because that's just an experience. So, you know, this is really interesting when you're talking about the 2 different kind of people who would utilize this as well, because there would be the person who owns it, who wants it, and then there's the 2 different kind of users. So you also have to have a different, you know, messaging there, I think.
Totally, and I think creating these we call them avatars or customer profiles is so important in really getting to understand what the motivations of all of them would be. And I think this is my second example is from a platform, maybe a home sharing platform. For example, Airbnb is obviously the one we all know the best. So this is our provider. She works, so she's got a great job in tech, she travels a lot, she's got a lovely apartment, and she rents that out on an Airbnb when she's not there. So she's a provider, but when she travels, she uses Airbnb. So she is the same person. And that there's a huge crossover on these home sharing platforms, because people who are predisposed to rent out their apartment would also probably be predisposed to use other people's apartments when they're traveling, because they understand the process. or they could be completely different on the same platform. So again, you've got that layer of complexity. So say, for example, a home sharing platform, you might have maybe an older person who rents out their spare room on an Airbnb, but they do it because they like the company and having someone stay, a bit like a lodger, but less permanent. But when they travel, they are maybe a lover of cruises, and they wouldn't think of staying in someone else's home. It's not for them. So again, the same kind of platform, two distinct groups, and again, this provider user being the same person. And I think you had another example of that, didn't you, Sigrid?
Yeah, I was just looking through, well, we have tons of examples within classifieds as well, but for instance, if you think about car selling on classifieds, there you have one seller group would be the professional car sellers, and you have to have a very distinct messaging to them, because obviously for them it's not just about selling a car one time, it's about having a whole portfolio of cars on the classified side. And then we have the private car seller, which would be you and me, and we want to exchange our car for a newer model or a different model, and we just have to get rid of our car. And there it's a whole different, because then it becomes personal, right? The messaging has to be, it's your car, you have like a personal relationship with that car. I'm not saying you love your car, but it's gonna be well, some people might love their car, right? It has to be very personal. And a whole other kind of trust that you have to build there, right? And then the third person you have to do messaging towards would be the buyer of the car. So and there again, kind of you can divide that into different kind of personas as well, because there would be like the young couple who are buying their first car and they don't have a lot of budget, and then there would be the person who likes to just change his car out every, like my partner's dad, he changes his car every 2 years. I don't know what that's about, but that's a hobby for him. He loves cars, so when he buys cars, it's a completely different messaging than to the person who's buying their first cheap car because they can't really afford anything else. So a lot of different personas that you would have to message through there.
Yeah, and this is why we always say, doing that foundational work, doing that research, and creating all possible profiles, all possible avatars for people that might use your platform, and really drilling down and understanding what their motivations might be. And I think motivations for getting involved in the sharing economy is very interesting, because people might assume that people want to do this for the sustainability aspect, but people are led by all sorts of different motivations, and you have to tap into those if you want to make sure your marketing reaches them effectively. So to summarize, really, I think we need to educate potential users and providers. We need to use our marketing to build trust, this trust that has been eroded by our love of big, trustworthy brands. And we need to remember that the two sides of your platform have different motivations, and that they consume different media. So there's no point in trying to reach your mature camper van owner via a Snapchat advert, because they're just not going to be there. So all that research, I think, is really going to help you to reach the right people and talk to them in the right way. Did you have any more comments, Sigrid, about those points, or do we have time for any questions?
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions that I would like to get to, and also please feel free to add more questions for us if you have any. This is your chance. I know that if I had the chance to ask marketing questions, that would I would take it, because good to pick Elle's brain.
People can email.
Yeah, exactly. We will include our contact details in the follow-up mail with the recording here. But so we have one here, which I think relates back to quite neatly to the summary you did in the end here, about which side of the platform do you build up first, it says here.
Yes, that's we get asked that a lot. It's very interesting, and people often call it the chicken and egg, but to me it's I think that once you understand the way that the two sides of a marketplace work, then it is quite clear the way that you do it. And this isn't the same for all. Obviously, you need to research your own marketplace and what you're actually offering. But generally, we would say that if you can build up your inventory, build up your providers, they are in it for the long game. They are more happy to wait. They understand that if they are going to make money and rent out their asset or provide their service, then they're not going to get something immediately from that when they join your marketplace. And I think it's really important, again, in your marketing to make sure that they understand that and they're part of something. You build up your inventory, build up your providers. Whereas users, if they come to your platform and they don't see enough range and they don't see what they want, then they might go away and never come back. So if you've got the inventory there and if you build up your providers, then start to bring users in and show them that you have a range. They are the ones that need to see that immediately, whereas the providers, you can explain to them that it's an investment of their time to be registered on the platform, and they're not always going to see the results straight away.
Yeah, agreed. We have another question here from Ahmed, I think. Sorry if I'm murdering the name. Can you give specific examples of go-to-market strategies for two-sided marketplaces?
That's quite a broad question. I don't know if I've got time to give sort of specific examples there. I mean, what I'm talking about in today's presentation really is about messaging and reaching those audiences. I think a go-to-market strategy is a much more, is a more complex piece. So maybe that's something that the person asking could maybe get in touch about, because I think we've only got about a minute left. So I'm not sure that we would have a chance to get into sort of go-to-market strategies right now.
I think also there's I can maybe recommend, I think Share Tribe has done a book, I can't remember what it's called right now, sorry, Youre. Sorry?
Is it Lean Marketplace?
Lean Marketplaces, and there they actually give some examples of go-to-marketplace strategies. So go-to-market strategies. So I could recommend reading that. And there was another, I'll see if I can dig up, because I read a book a couple of years ago which had a lot of good examples about how to, where they are talking about it's important that you should focus on like a small segment and like hyper focus, build up the providers there, and then get the consumers on, and then you can broaden up. So make sure that you have a hyper focus, make that work, and then you can broaden from there. And I think that is that's a good way of doing it.
And I think it does vary marketplace to marketplace, and thinking about what your offering is, and where you can to build up your first sort of say 1,000 users, and how you can do that. And there are different tried and tested methods, but I think the Share Tribe book is a really good reference.
It's really good. It's a good place to start. Sorry, it was Svetoslav who asked this. We have another question from Imran Ahmed. We'll see here. How do you get the first 1,000 customers organically on both sides of the marketplaces? I think that's also kind of a growth hacking question. And actually, good news to you guys. I am currently looking to start a growth hacking webinar as well. So hopefully I'll get that done by after the summer. So stay tuned for that one. We have another question here. Can you share some ways to show our users that they should trust our brand, especially and then it cuts out.
Okay, that's maybe what actually, Sigrid, isn't it?
I mean, of course, as I said, one of the things is that it's really, really important that they have a smooth user experience all the way through, and that goes from the second that they open your app, or even before that, actually, it has to be easy to open your app. It has to be easy to download it. It has to be easy to use it. If it's a website, it has to be easy to navigate it. You have to, when you search for things, you have to find that specific thing that you search. We have had a lot of user surveys that we've done and user behavior tests where people get really frustrated if they find, for instance, they search for an iPhone and then they find iPhone chargers. That's not what they want. They will leave the site immediately. So that whole kind of user journey has to be smooth. And then going further into that journey, it has to be smooth to pay, it has to be smooth to meet up, it has to be smooth to get delivery, or the delivery of the service, as you were kind of talking about with if you're inviting someone to do garden work, you have to be sure that that person is going to do the garden work that you want them to do, and they're going to do it in a professional manner. So it's a matter of, you know, you can utilize ratings, you can utilize connect them to like their social profiles so that they can follow them. And most importantly, of course, I have to say this, but it's also what we found is true, you have to make sure that when they actually engage with users, those users are trustworthy. So if they engage with scammers, then you have lost. Then that's a customer that's never coming back.
Yeah, and I think that by doing these things, you are also making your platform sticky, and you are preventing that leakage or disintermediation, and that brand trust. It will serve you well at any stage of your growth, because if people feel that they trust your brand, that they are more likely to interact with your platform rather than a user or provider interaction of the platform. And this happens quite a lot in gig economy platforms, where people will connect via the platform but then take that interaction off the platform. Obviously then you lose revenue. But these tactics that you're talking about, Sigrid, I think are very good to prevent that. And also building a community and making people feel happy that they're interacting with you and that they're rewarded for interacting with you as well. So things like incentives and you know, referrals, recommending a friend and getting, you know, a benefit from that. These types of marketing strategies will really help people to stay on the trusted platform and feel that they're part of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think we are a little bit over time, but we have a couple of more questions. So I'll just want to finish those, and then we can wrap up. Here's one thing. Can you advise and share some ways to show, not tell, to our users that they should trust our brand? Especially we haven't. Okay. Here's the rest of the question. We haven't involved the transaction process yet. So in terms of transactions, again, I don't think either me or Elle are experts in that. However, we do have some people that I've talked to, like ShieldPay, for instance, or Stripe, or those kind of providers who can help you build the trust in that process. So I think ShieldPay is gonna. They don't release the funds until both parties have said that they are happy. So they will kind of hold that money until everyone says that, yes, I am happy with this transaction. And that's a great way of making sure that the users feel that they can trust. Because if they get a broken broken iPhone, for instance, then they can say, no, I'm not happy with it, and then they won't actually release the funds to the seller.
Great.
There's another question here that is more like something down your alley, I think. What's the most brave marketing activity you know someone made in order to acquire more users, not providers?
Users. Well, I think that there's a real trend for this sort of, you know, kind of FOMO activity. You know, the kind of creating a kind of must be part of a community, usually on things like you know, for younger audiences on sort of social media, on Instagram. There was one in, I don't know if you've been reading about Clubhouse, which has just had a huge round of investment. It's a social media platform, not a sharing platform, but it is a platform. And they've just created this absolute whirl of this sort of FOMO, so that people want to be part of it. So social media platform where you used to listen into conversations. On the back of this, they got their first 1,000 or very small amount of users, but a huge amount of investment. And it was all about creating this buzz on social media. So it was all organic. They didn't really put any money into it. And it is quite a brave thing to do, but it worked. And they got a lot of tech insiders talking about it online, and just tapped into that kind of, people wanting to be part of something. That's
really cool.
Yeah, it is. You had to read about it on Twitter. It's really interesting, some of the commentary on it, of how they've done this, with no budget really. They've just really tapped into people wanting a new thing.
Yeah, cool. Maybe we can just add the name of that to the follow-up mail that we sent to the listeners here, so you can research that. I have another example. I don't know again if it's like super brave, but I thought it was interesting. Here in Sweden, Blockit, which is the biggest classified site, ran a campaign where they would take people who were selling stuff on their platform, and then they would make kind of a story around how they were selling it and what that had meant to them. And they made of course they found some interesting quirky personalities, right? But they had them talk about, I think it was one with some dresses, if I don't remember incorrectly, and the person selling them would be like dancing around with them and say, this reminds me of back when I was doing X, Y, and Z with this one. So they created this whole long YouTube clips. They were like 3, 4, 5 minutes long, this whole story around these items and what they had meant to the people who were selling them. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. It at least it stuck in my brain, and it kind of, I mean, it's kind of ties in.
Is there? It's the emotional connection that we were talking about as well, isn't it? It makes it human.
Exactly. We have time for one more question. There's no more right now, but if anyone has like a final question, we can take that now. And then if not, while we wait for that, I just wanted to kind of segue into a question I had for you, Elle, about influencer marketing, because this kind of is a pendant to that, or utilizing actual sellers. But would that be working for marketplaces, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's been a lot of negativity around influencer marketing recently, actually. But I think there's always a place for it. I quite like working with sort of micro and even these sort of nano influencers, as they call them. But again, it's about understanding your profiles of your users and your providers and working out where they hang out, and what media they're consuming, because there's no point in trying to force an Instagram influencer on our Winnebago owner, because he's not going to be there to see that. He's not on these social media channels. But when you look at the camper van, the van life hashtag, they are going to probably see influencers. But I think it's something you have to choose carefully as well, because there has been recently a sort of growing mistrust of influencer marketing. So I think it's really important to choose maybe really authentic influencers, maybe sort of lower level, that consumers really genuinely believe in, and make sure that you're not just choosing someone based on the amount of likes on their account or something, because they have to be really part of that community. I like sometimes hunting out really quite small influencers, because the people that follow them are really likely to be very engaged and to very much trust the influencer, or quite often they will have a blog or something around that rather than just be on Instagram, and they're able to really engage the people around them. Whereas I think some of the big influencers have kind of lost a bit of trust recently. There's been quite a few negative stories about people just taking on sort of paid sponsorships, but not really sort of believing in the brands.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as something becomes paid, it loses authenticity. That's just how it is. Cool. I think we can wrap it. Oh, there was the last question, just at the last second. Any important points on marketing growth of a job board that is for narrowed professional sphere?
Oh, I didn't quite hear
any important points on marketing growth of a job board that is for kind of a narrow professional sphere? So I think just to kick that off, Elle, and I think you would agree with me, first and foremost, you have to figure out, as you've been saying multiple times, where are your kind of narrow audience hanging out and how are they communicating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's about their, it's about motivations, and it's also about what their barriers are, and how you can break down the barriers, and what their pain points are, and how you can provide a solution, what they're doing already, and how what you're offering them make things better. So again, it's getting into that persona and really putting yourself in the mindset of somebody that you want to use your platform, and making sure you're addressing all of those things, breaking down all the fears and barriers, and providing solutions to the issues that they have. And sometimes people will come up with an idea for a marketplace and it really just doesn't provide a solution, and some, you know, that can happen. It's not a better way of doing it than the traditional way, and that can happen. I always find it a bit disappointing, because I like there to be a marketplace solution for everything, but there isn't sometimes. It's got to solve a problem, otherwise people won't stop doing things the traditional way and move on to your platform. They won't see it as a benefit to them.
Now, I don't know what this narrow professional sphere is, of course, but I can use a quick example here. If you're looking to hire developers, for instance, developers are, of course, you can't say that all developers are like this, but developers in general really dislike marketing in traditional ways. They probably won't be a lot on LinkedIn because they are getting spammed by recruiters. So that's not a good channel to kind of advertise to them. You have to figure out, so where would they be? Well, some, if they are located in India, and again, I'm generalizing, they might be on Quora because it's a little bit more tech and it's a little bit under the hood, or they might be on Reddit. They might be, yeah, exactly. If they are, like my partner, for instance, is spending a lot of time on Reddit, and he's a developer. But again, you know, the normal kind of commercials that will say get a job here or join this platform, they would not work on him because he hates that, and he's tech, so he has ad blockers, you know. So so you really have to figure out, and if it's someone who's really like veterinaries or something like that, where would they be, and how would they, what kind of messaging would they respond to? That's what you have to kind of figure out. Yeah, so I think that's the main point.
Yeah, getting to know the crowd and where that crowd is hanging out is so important. And the crowd on Reddit. I mean, imagine going onto Reddit to try and market something that, you know, there's a huge swathe of the population that don't even know what Reddit is. So, you know,
exactly. No, but actually, we just got a question here saying that it is exactly for developers. So can I just specifically for that, make sure you're genuine and genuinely take part of kind of the community, because Reddit is super harsh with commercials. Most Reddit users hate commercials. You have to be genuinely taking part of the community, otherwise you're gonna be downvoted a lot.
Yeah. Totally.
So I guess with that, any final thoughts? Otherwise, I think we'll wrap up, because now we've gone 15 minutes over time.
Yeah, no, just to get in touch if you have any questions about this. It is a very condensed version of the way that you can reach two sides, and how you can instill trust, and how you can educate using your marketing. But obviously, it's all a much bigger picture. But yeah, feel free to get in touch. And our website, which currently has a sort of temporary message for the COVID crisis, is ganghutmedia.com.
Yeah, I apologize for my partner just came in with the baby now. I was just saying 2 minutes, so if there was a lot of noise, I apologize. Yeah, but thank you so much for joining us, Elle. You can reach both of us on LinkedIn, and as mentioned, we're going to send out a follow-up email with the link to the recording once it's ready. And Elle, you also have a downloadable that you're putting together right now with some kind of points from this presentation. We'll send that out as well, and both of these things are also going to be available on bezedo.com once we just need to, you know, have the recording properly processed, etc. So sometimes next week, I would assume that we have both of these things ready for you guys. And thank you so much for joining and being super engaged. It was great. Appreciate it. And thank you, Elle, for a great rundown here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.